To Israel now, where the military says it's carried out a drone strike on a car in the occupied West Bank, which claims it contained members of a terrorist cell. Army officials say 3 Palestinian gunmen were killed. It's said to have been the first airstrike by Israeli army for 17 years. Our correspondent in Jerusalem is Irris Makler. We can cross to her now. Irris, bring us up to date with the latest. This is 3 days of consecutive violence there.
3 days of consecutive violence, and this airstrike is something unusual. The first time in 17 years that we've seen this. And what that means is, of course, there weren't drones 17 years ago. It's an airstrike targeting Palestinians. Israel says it was a cell of 3 militants on their way to actually carry out a shooting. There is drone surveillance from the air, but we haven't seen this kind of thing. We haven't seen a drone strike of this kind, actually, because there weren't drones 17 years ago. It is significant. We heard from Israel's defense minister praising the action and saying that Israel will act with all the technology that's available to it, and immediately it's a responsive military. We heard from Hamas, the Islamist group that controls the Gaza Strip, that wants to control the West Bank. And what they said was they criticised this, they condemned this action, they say it's an escalation, and they say it will be met by a response. So I think you're standing here at the end, every day there's some, with just back-to-back violence, each day something else, and you can't help but see that you are definitely living through an escalation. And by the way, the people who are paying the price here are not those who've committed the acts. Once again, violence begets violence, and it's the innocent people who pay the price.
Irris, if you can just set some context here, because we go back to Monday, this of another rise in violence. I think it was the first time a helicopter gunship was used by the Israelis in around 20 years. So what's happened in the last few days leading up to this?
I think one of the things I'd really like to focus on is the violence that was carried out, these riots, these rampages by settlers last night in response to this, because I think it's also a failure of Israel's military to control these acts. Israel's prime minister has said this is a state of law. Israel's defense minister has said to the settlers, don't take the law into your own hands. However, these people do take the law into their own hands after some provocation or other, or sometimes without a provocation. But let's just look at the last 3 days. So we saw rioting after the attack by Palestinian gunmen, which killed 4 Israelis. We saw rioting in the northern West Bank on that night, an unrelated village to the event. After the funeral of the youngest person to be killed, the 17-year-old Israeli student, then we saw people who left that funeral and came running in on a rampage into a nearby village, also unrelated to the event. So you're seeing that ordinary people are responding, settlers particularly, with a license they feel to behave in this way, and some of their leaders supporting that. So that, I think, is part of what we're seeing. It's not all of it. It's also an intention of the Islamist group Hamas to position itself as the leader. It's all this violence, the action, the gunman yesterday, 2 days ago, that's a calling card from Hamas to say to the West Bank, we are poised to take over. There's a political vacuum. The Palestinian Authority is getting weaker, and we will come in as we did in Gaza, and we will take over on the West Bank, and look how reliable we are. May not seem reliable to the outside world, but that's the message here. So both of these factors are coming together, I think.